Morning, everybody. I didn't hear morning back. Morning, everybody. Good to be back. I think everyone is happy to be away from Teams calls and Zoom calls, and we still need a physical presence. But great to be back. Thank you to the Informa team for having myself once again here. So this morning we're going to talk about SMMEs and what an important part of the sector they play. So in my job, I lead Accenture's communications, media, and technology practice. And one of the things that I do with my clients is we're always looking at how they're being disrupted, what they need to think about, and looking at the market, what's important to them. And SMMEs play a big part. If I think of the telco sector, if the media sector, the SMMEs play quite a large part of that sector. There's employment there, there's economic growth there, but there's a problem that, from a digital perspective, I think some of the speakers spoke about it. I feel that, and I think the industry as a whole, we're kind of leaving SMMEs behind. So this morning we're gonna have some robust debate about SMMEs and what we need to do to supercharge their growth from a digital perspective. So I want to welcome some of my panel, and maybe we'll start yourself, Joseph, and then Masha, Nastasia, Habiba.
Thank you very much. Is it morning or is it?
It is still the morning.
Still morning.
Okay, good morning. The name is Joseph Ndaba. I am the CEO of Mafeking Digital Innovation Hub, based in Northwest Province, and I also served on the Presidential Commission on the Fourth Industrial Revolution. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Matupani Masha. I'm from the Gauteng Department of Economic Development, mainly responsible for driving program implementation, especially in the townships. Our focus really is how do we use digital platforms to narrow the gap between SMMEs and opportunities generally. So we'll get into details, I think, later. Thank you.
Awesome. I'm Nastasia. Nice to meet everybody. I look after the SME and SOHO segment at Vodacom. Super passionate about small business development, and luckily enough, this is my job now at Vodacom. So looking forward to engaging with my colleagues about this very diverse but big opportunity.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Habiba Ben Barka. I'm the chief of the Africa section at the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, based in Geneva. The work that we do are mostly research, policy advice, and technical assistant product that we design for African countries to push forward the trade and development agendas. Thank you.
Great, fantastic. So maybe, Joseph, let's start with you then. From a 4IR perspective, lots of work done with the commission, etc. But if you think about, getting SMMEs to be formidable players in the market, and in the digital era, what needs to be done? Because, we were talking about it earlier. I mean, I don't know how many SMMEs are in the room.
Exactly.
Not many. What do we need to get right?
I was actually going to ask that question to say, how many SMMEs do we have in here today? I see one. Yeah, no. We are actually having a serious issue in terms of, bringing SMMEs to the picture. We always speak for SMMEs, but we actually don't involve them. Like right now when I'm sitting, like we're discussing to say, when we look at spaces like this, how many SMMEs actually get an opportunity to be part of these engagements, to make sure that they actually connect with the leaders within the industry that will actually assist them to be able to push their businesses forward. But what I also need to say is in terms of SMMEs themselves, they need to actually start claiming the space, because we have this issue that people start businesses so as government can actually assist them. And somehow that mentality, it is somehow wrong. Because when SMMEs or when you start a business, you're not starting it so as government can come and fund you. You're starting it because you saw a challenge and then you need to solve that problem. So SMMEs must start taking their own space, and most importantly, they need to start being more innovative, because there is no way that you are going to address, the challenges that you are sitting with right now, still thinking the way we were thinking about 10 and 15 years back. So SMMEs right now, they need to understand that for them to actually play within this market, they need to start being innovative. They need to start getting out there and be able to say, actually, I need to show people what I can be able to do. And they need to start, networking. Because one thing that we've realized is we work a whole lot in silos. So SMMEs need to start building networks. They need to start talking to each other. They need to be understanding that for us to be able to be successful, we need to build an ecosystem. Thanks.
Thank you, Joseph. A few weeks ago, I was in Kigali in Rwanda, and one of the hot topics was startups.
Yeah.
And, there's a hindrance of startups, structurally setting them up, contributing to the economy. Lots needs to be done. So Habiba, maybe some thoughts from an African perspective. I know you spend a lot of time in Africa, and also an economist. Your thoughts around what's stopping that culture of startups here?
Well, startups, especially in Africa, they face the same challenges that, I think it's okay. The same challenges that most SMEs face. Basically, it's access to the means for growth, financial and structurally. So in terms of financial challenges or barriers that to the emergence of African startup is that the current structure of Africa financial institutions on the continent, they kind of provide services and financial products that are not necessarily adapted to the specific needs of the startup. So there is a lot of risk that financial institutions will believe that they will face when they have to invest in a startup. They believe that there's limited return on that type of investment. So those are the financial barriers, but also the structural barriers will be, we have the lack or limited low quality of digital infrastructure and also physical infrastructure that kind of has been a barrier for the growth of those SMEs and startups more particularly. But when it comes back to African startups, I think there's also a lack of maybe a cultural embracement of startup in the sense that they don't necessarily have the own, we saw only a few of them there, so they don't sell themselves well, in the sense that they shy a little bit on some of the innovative ideas that they have. Of course, they don't have the financial means to bring that to fruitful stage. But so there's a lot of lack of interest from the policymakers in terms of supporting them, do a lot of R&Ds and pushing them really to innovate more and really enter more competitively the different markets that they operate in. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So maybe Matapani, over to you. And this is an interesting one. Andila was speaking earlier about regulators becoming enablers.
Yes.
And since you're from the government, I'm going to put you on the hotspot. But no, I'm kidding. So I think if you think about policies and frameworks for SMMEs, if you think about South Africa, if you think about Africa, a lot needs to be done from a policy and a framework perspective. From a provincial government perspective in Gauteng, any thoughts around what do you see happening more of, for there to be this vibrant SMME economy that grows, but with the right regulatory frameworks?
Thanks a lot. So there has to be regulatory framework that actually enables investment or at least reduces the cost of doing business for small SMMEs. So in Gauteng, for example, what we have done is to basically focus on a couple of things that drives SME participation, at least in terms of the formal economy. One is that we're looking at de-risking SMMEs. So part of the township economy program, for example, that we've just started implementing includes programs that de-risk SMMEs. As we know that, for example, if you're a small SMMEs and you want to access funds, chances are someone is going to ask you for a record of some financial transaction for a period of time. But what we're saying is that if you want to bridge the divide between formalized and informal, you need to be able to create transition mechanism for SMMEs that are informal to be able to enter formality. For example, through payment systems. So even if I'm not a registered SMME, but I'm conducting business, whether it's an informal trader on the side of the road, chances are over time I'm building record using digital platforms to do that, but also to be able to enable delivery in terms of the solutions that we have. So what we are also doing is to basically use digital platforms. Like we have a portal that we've established, which basically creates an interface between SMMEs and business and government as well, either in terms of accessing opportunities, but also what it does is to enable clustering mechanism where, for example, as you know, if you are in a single SMME in the township or in our community, chances are you may not be able to actually supply bulk products to big corporates. But if you cluster these guys and you provide supporting systems, you can actually create channels for these guys to be able to actually access bigger markets, even global markets. So pretty much, I think what we're saying is that the policy frameworks that we have must actually lower the cost of doing business for SMMEs, must create channels through which these guys can interact and be able to actually grow and create these much needed jobs and transit between informal to formal as well. Thank you.
Fantastic.
Can I lean in on
Yeah,
that one,
sure, go for
Nitesh?
it.
So I think it's a lot about the financial structure, but I think we also, the enablers, as they call it, the regulators need to also understand the enabling ecosystem, devices, connectivity, smartphones, mobile money. I mean, we had cases in Tanzania and DRC where there would be levies on smartphones or levies on mobile money. And while we can do all of these amazing, have all of these amazing policies around, you know, financial inclusion, making sure that they can participate with larger corporates, if your customers, which are the bigger part of where we're going to get SME growth, are having their ecosystem pretty much trampled on, that will affect their ability to have growth. But the good thing is we have started seeing some regulators that have introduced certain levies also being equally as keen to take them away when they realize they aren't working. In the DRC, they've actually removed mobile money levies, tax on smartphones. In Tanzania, they've actually removed levies on mobile money. So it's good for us to think about it at all aspects as well.
So I've got a follow-up question for you, being the lone telco here. So, you know, if you think about connectivity and lots of 4G and 5G yet to come, still pretty much 3G, 4G in the continent, you know, what role do you see connectivity playing as SMMEs need to innovate more? From a Vodacom business perspective, I'm sure, you know, you're spending a lot of time grappling with that question, but what do you guys see that needs to happen more?
So thanks for that question, Nitesh. And I don't know if I actually have any of my technology colleagues in the room. I think they're going to be really proud that one of the business people are actually talking about 4G and 5G. But as Nika even mentioned in terms of like mobile money, where the agents are the unsung heroes within connectivity, and specifically within the Vodacom side as well, we see that our technology providers are actually the unsung heroes. Because everything that we discuss around all the parts of the ecosystem that we can look at and influence, if you don't have solid connectivity, guys, it's impossible to participate. It's impossible to reach customers. It's impossible to find information. It's impossible to find the opportunities or how you're going to enter new markets. So definitely the role of connectivity. I know we started with like, you know, lower generation networks of 2G, 3G. Now we've progressed to 4G. I think even ahead of 5G coming, it's going to bring amazing opportunities in future, but there's so much that SMEs can work with right now in the, with all the advantages that 4G even brings in being able to, participate effectively within the ecosystem. So yes, all the speed, reliability, all of the amazing things that technology brings, that is the enabler. But I pretty much see it as the background layer. It's that invisible layer, that invisible safety net. When that just works, everything else, it's one less thing that an SME needs to focus on. And that's what our jobs are at within Vodacom, to make sure that that's the background, the last thing that an SME needs to worry about.
Fantastic. I think if there's less things for them, all the better. So maybe, Joseph, if you think about the work you're doing and 4AR and, with the council, you're obviously looking in the market, you're identifying lots of disruptive players. Yeah. What are you seeing out there? What type of disruptive players are out there from in this market, in the SMME market? And what lessons can you share with the guys today?
I'm not so sure if as how we market South Africa. I don't think brand South Africa is doing much justice to our SMMEs. and innovators, because in most cases, when you look at what is happening, you don't actually see South African SMMEs, or innovators, showcasing their innovations. In most cases, you see your multi-international businesses actually, coming and running the show, And, for an example, you take, sorry, Uber, ne? You take Uber for an example. Okay, sorry, ne, guys. Easy. You take such, you take, different innovators that are on the space. And most of this, it is not South African based, unfortunately. And in that being said, is we still have a challenge as innovators within the space, to actually showcase what we have. Because you may find that there's a lot of good innovation happening in this country. But because of, I'm not so sure if we don't have much platform to actually show the world to say, this is what we can be able to do in South Africa, then please come in and then actually partner with us. But what we normally see is, your multinationals businesses is the one that is actually taking the space. And I want to urge the innovators today that are sitting in here to say, like I said in the beginning, we need to take your space. You need to start making sure that we actually know what you are doing out there, so as we can actually tell your story. Because at times, we tell all these other big company stories, but we actually don't tell our own story. So without even pointing to say, we are seeing this guy's doing this guy's doing this, I actually want to make sure that all the innovators out there, if you have a good story to tell, please talk to us. Let's see how best we can be able to take you and showcase you and say, this, it is what we are producing in this country. Thanks.
No, thank you. So Habiba, I want to follow up with that. If you think about SMMEs, to be successful, they need partnerships. And they need to be involved in policy making, etc. Maybe share a little bit of your thoughts around, is this happening, is this not happening? What do they need to do?
Well, in terms of partners, I think the first one, and that's the public sector. They cannot do without the public sector, especially when it comes to policy making. We saw a lot of public sector experts speaking here, so I will not repeat what they said, but I think there has been a missing link basically between startup and then the public sector on the continent, because the public sector, the regulator enablers, which I believe they still should be called regulators, because there need to be some type of follow-up in the system, but I think they don't understand the type of products that startup can create. They don't understand the technical aspect of it. So how would you design any policy that can either support or better drive this type of product and services if yourself as an individual, you don't understand, you have no clue what that specific product is about. You take the case of some countries, and I know in Africa we have South Africa, Rwanda, Kenya that are setting up kind of the Silicon Valley of those countries and are trying to really push forward the growth of those special startups. But what is missing also is that those startup or innovation hubs or technological centers do not speak to the regulator, do not speak to the central banks, they don't speak to some of the ministries. So how would you put policies in place? How would you design tech-enabling financial services or products that can really support the growth? So that has been the missing link in Africa. But startup on the side also need to reach out to other companies, not only in Africa, but even abroad, to not only to create more linkages within specific sector or, like you mentioned, across creating across cluster of industries, but they need also to reach out to other private entities outside of the continent to learn from the experience, so there could be some kind of skill spillover. And last but not least, it's coming to the financial sector again. Sorry, this is my big take, because I think that's the main challenge for innovators. And I think they really need to reach out also to investors. So it's not only the regular financial banking sector that we are talking about. We are talking about angel investors. We are talking about the online lending platform that can really see the benefit, the interest, or the return on investment on the specific product that they're designing, and they can design some specific products that will better hedge the risk of investing in that product, but still will be able to address some of the financing needs.
Nitesh, can I take a bite on that?
Go for it.
One thing that we need to also start look, I'm glad that you said public servants. One thing that you need to start looking at is how then do we introduce digital transformation, especially in government? Because, like you rightly said, you have innovators that need support, but when they get to those offices, people actually don't understand what they're saying because they are actually not much exposed to what these innovators are actually doing. So, other thing is we are not doing justice to the SMMEs because we are actually building policies without them. So we don't engage them when we build these policies, but the policies, we need these policies to assist them, but we actually don't know what they want because we don't involve them when making these policies.
That's a good point. Maybe, Matapane, to you. For this adoption to happen, lots of digital technologies out there, and you want SMMEs to use them, but there needs to be training, there needs to be education. Otherwise, all of this is just pointless. Any thoughts on what are you seeing that the provincial government can do?
So thanks for that question. So I think we in Gauteng we've invested a lot in infrastructure. So we, for example, are still expanding to make sure that all our areas in our townships, in our communities, have broadband fiber connectivity, because definitely for these SMMEs to have access, they need to have reliable, at least, connectivity where they live. But also, part of our programming includes, for example, rollout of what you call, whether it's digital hubs in the townships, global business services in the townships. So what we are doing basically is to try and make sure that people can stay, live, and work where they, basically in the townships or in the communities where they are, by introducing technology. So as you will know that what COVID has done has obviously heightened or at least enhanced some opportunities in the economy, including last mile delivery opportunities, for example. If you check on your App Store now, KZD, you will discover that it's a Tembisa-based last mile delivery platform that is really growing and making waves in our townships. And we are, together with them, investing in training young people in and around the townships so that they actually be able to provide certain services to those in the townships, make sure that there's growth as well. So definitely there is a lot of focus on investment in training to make sure that obviously there's a bit of access to these opportunities as well. So we are definitely open for business. We are looking for different sort of solutions to make sure that we drive job creation, but also we enable young people especially to come into this space and be able to participate. And as the president said earlier, they are able to actually own the future that we're creating now. Thank you.
Fantastic. So, Nastasia, this one's for you. I remember I was telling you earlier I was involved with M-Pesa when it was implemented all those years ago. And what I saw of that was a very vibrant SMME ecosystem that was created, right? So what learnings, you guys obviously working a lot with your Kenyan colleagues now. What learnings can we take from that for other SMMEs here in South Africa, other parts of the continent? What have they done right there? And anything you can share with the guys on this?
Awesome. Thanks for that, Nitesh. So I think there's no doubt that M-Pesa's been a phenomenal success, and I'm super proud to be associated with all the success and all the opportunities that it's brought. I think one of the things that's super encouraging about M-Pesa and their journey, it's been a 15-year journey. I think, you know how they always say it takes 10 years to be an overnight success. But it's been building out the ecosystem, the technology, the education, and also walking the journey with where people are. As Nika touched on earlier, it starts with the simple use case of cash in, cash out, being able to send money across. So any learnings that I would just suggest just from the M-Pesa success is don't over-innovate the solution, because then you leave the actual customers behind. Only now that M-Pesa's gotten the scale and the reach and the ecosystem, more than 50 million people participating in the actual ecosystem itself, starting to actually transition into removing the whole cash in, cash out, and actually developing the ecosystem so people can spend within. Because I think one of the things that was missing is the reason why there was a cash in, cash out is because there wasn't enough in the ecosystem to keep the money there. So with the birth of the M-Pesa Super App, allowing small businesses to start participating from an e-commerce perspective, it now gives more users of the M-Pesa platform, more merchants or businesses, SMEs, that they actually can start transacting with. And that way we'll be able to develop the ecosystem even further. So similar, following that journey, I think there's a lot of opportunities within Africa. It's just, I think we're very focused on claiming the startup space, which I think is super important, and we need to do a lot of work around nurturing it. But it's also the everyday business, your survivalist kind of entrepreneur. What type of frameworks, ecosystems, support are we putting in place for them to thrive? Because that's where the volume is going to come from, and that's where a lot of the actual financial inclusion and economic growth that we're looking for will come from.
Fantastic. So we're ending the end of the discussion now. Maybe, Joseph, we got all the SMMEs looking to you to save them, to get this, get them involved in the digital economy. But maybe in 1 minute, any final words or thoughts you can share on how do we get them to be supercharged?
How do we get you SMMEs to be supercharged? Let's make sure that we create platforms that will actually assist you to engage. I'm glad that we're sitting with provincial government of Gauteng. You see, I'm going to ask them to actually create that platform for SMMEs to be able to engage, And to all government employees that are sitting in here, please create that platform. And to all private companies that are also sitting in here, please, let's create that platform so as we can be able to assist our innovators. Thank you.
Any last words, sir?
Thank you. So as I said earlier, so we are open for business really. In Gauteng, we're looking for different solutions to be able to connect our SMMEs to opportunities, but also enable them to grow as well. Whether it's funding, so it's about time that we check out this notion of the way we've been profiling SMMEs, for example, for us to fund them. So with technology, we can be able to do a lot of things, including collect data over time and use that to determine whether SMMEs actually qualify for funding or not, and many other of these solutions. But also bring this to, for example, we know globally there are not a lot of new jobs that are emerging out of the big corporates, whether it's your data labeling and all of those things. We need to be able to make sure that we create an environment for young people to access these opportunities and be able to create these much needed jobs in our economy. Thank you.
Fantastic. Nastasia?
Well, so I think for me, what's super important is that technology levels the playing field for small businesses. The type of stuff that they could have access to versus before technology, it's like chalk and cheese. There's a lot of resources just even sitting in this room, leaning in on this topic. But if I had to ask you within your organizations that you represent and all the access to resources that you have, how much of that is actually spent trying to extract the value out of this particular segment, either from an enablement perspective or even a product development perspective? So what I'd really like to ask colleagues in the room, peers, industry players, make sure that your investment is actually matching the opportunity that we see within the SME space.
Lovely. Lastly, Abiba?
Well, I will advise SME, startup, tech, and all that to also look at the market they're really servicing, the customers, because design or innovation really happens on customer demand market research that has been done elsewhere, but it has not looked at the African context, the African reality, the needs, and the capabilities of the customers. So there's have to be SMEs or in partnership with policymakers, with government and all, to really understand what African markets really are looking for, what they can afford, and then start designing those type of products and services.
Fantastic. So I hope our SMMEs are in safe hands. Great discussion, everybody. And let's make sure that we help SMMEs, think about them differently. For the guys in the room, whichever corporates you represent or government, it's a part of the economy that we really need to be part of and helping them. Thank you.
Thank you.